Good afternoon, Dave Baldwin here with Baldwin Systems, and I have with me a special guest, Latanya Dubois, and we're going to talk about the role of trauma and specifically how does trauma impact business owners. Those of you who've seen some of my past videos, you know that I love to work with the small but mighty businesses that are around that 3 to 5 year mark. And there's, as I've talked about in some of my other videos, there's a lot of problems that pop up specifically at that window. And we're going to talk about a couple of those different things from a standpoint that, Latanya is going to bring her specialty in today. Before we get into that, though, I want to just open up the floor here and ask you, Latanya, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your business?
Sure. So my name is Latanya Dubois, he said, and I own Eagle Eye Management. What we do at Eagle Eye is focus on operations and systems development for small businesses that are looking to overcome overwhelm. So when you think about small business, you think about all the day-to-day operations that needs to take place, as well as the strategic planning to keep your business in a sustainable area. You want to make sure that you have everything you need in a consistent flow, and that's what we help you do.
I think overwhelm is a very good, accurate word to describe what happens. Well, first of all, it happens at every stage of a business, but specifically when I look at there's the classic statistics. Some people may have heard about the failure rates of businesses, that 20% of businesses fail within the first year, then 30% within 2 years, 50% within 5 years, and then 70% within 10 years. Yeah. So when you look at that 2 to 3 year mark, so after 2 years, 30% have already failed, have already closed their doors at that point. And then you might think that, okay, well, if I made it past 2 years, I'm in the clear now, right? But the statistics clearly indicate that that's not the case, because there's another 50% that have failed by the 5th year. So really, if you look at the difference of those two numbers, there's a 20% gap or 20% subset of businesses that make it past 2 years, but fail between the 3rd and the 5th year. So that's one of the things that I thought was just really an interesting thing to look at. But Latanya, what's your take on that? Why do you think that businesses manage to, what do you think are the specific issues that you see with the businesses that you've worked with during that segment of the 3rd to the 5th year of a business's life cycle?
Well, there's a few things that come into play. I think that fundamentally is really about them not knowing how to set up their systems early on. So they don't know that they need support. They don't know how to attain the support, or the support that they're getting is not really directly related to where they need to operate better. So they might say this is what they need, but until you understand how they're operating in their business, you really can't match up the needs that they have to what the business needs are. So I might tell you I need an admin person, but then I hire an admin person and don't know what to tell them to do. So I've wasted my money. So it's really that fundamental understanding of how to navigate your system in a way to identify what are the things that your business needs are, and then strategically outline how you're going to hit those marks, by when, with whom, and what things you may have to do in your business to set up to prepare for that.
So it sounds like it's really the fundamental issue is unrecognized needs or inability to see it. It goes right in line with the way I think. I would say the rule number 1 of consulting is never believe the client when they tell you what they need, because it's easy to say, well, I need an admin person, but do you really need an admin person, or is there a much more glaring issue somewhere else that's in a blind spot? So I think that's a great way to look at it. Yeah. Now, so let me ask you, what do you think businesses need to do sooner? We all know that if you put off decisions too long or don't put the right things in place early enough, by the time it's apparent that you've got a problem, it's already too late. What's your take on that? What do you think businesses need to do earlier than they typically do?
I definitely think they need to build their system sooner, so that they can identify when support is needed. So when I first started out with my consultancy, before I started coaching, I started realizing that I can only take about this many clients as a consultant because I traveled so much and I did so much. And before I learned that lesson, I was crashing and burning. I was tired. I didn't know which city I was going to be in next, but the money was flowing in, but I also was cash poor because I didn't understand, well, where's my money going? So understanding your systems would be important, how your money is flowing, how your clients come in, how you service your clients, how to market to those clients and create retention, or even reestablish relationships with those that didn't come back for services, like having all those things kind of worked out in your mind so that when you bring, and this is SOPs, obviously like standard operation procedures, but then you'll be able to bring in someone that can take that and replicate it for you. So you continue to be the CEO, have that clear mind to be creative and focus on organizational development and strategic planning.
No, I think that's so spot on so many different levels what you shared there, because I think I've experienced some of it myself and I've seen it in other businesses. It's easy to think that if cash flow is positive, or at least I've got more money in the bank this month than I had last month, and I'm moving in the right direction. But it's so easy that if you're not looking at the financials correctly, that you could actually be grossly undervalued but still cash flow positive. And I think one of the things you also hit really spot on is when you don't have standard operating procedures in place and you're doing it all as the business owner, there's no possible way to grow that, because somebody else can't take over and do the work for you because they don't know how you do it. And then the other issue I see happening with business owners is that they are the only one who can sell what they do, because the other people don't know how to describe it. There's no company messaging that's been put in place. There's no defined go-to-market strategy. There's so many of these different skill sets never transferred. Yes. And so what they get overwhelmed, they start hiring people, and then they quickly get frustrated because the other people can't perform to expectations. Right. Because in reality, they were already set up to fail from day one. But do you agree, disagree? You think what are your takes on that?
I totally agree. I think that is so perfectly said, because I think once you have established yourself as a business owner, and a lot of people haven't identified themselves as that, they're working like an employee, right? They're getting money, they're servicing, they're doing all the things that they know how to do, but they're not operating on the business. They're just staying in the space of, oh, I'm seeing my clients, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, I'm servicing them, I'm at the front lines. But if you don't know how to train or hire or interview or do any of those things, and you don't bring those people to the table with you, you run the risk of losing capacity, right? Losing capacity to serve, losing capacity. And if you really think about it, the biggest thing that I find people struggle with around customer service is they don't understand what their customers need anymore, because they're so disjointed, because they now are trying to reach these new opportunities to sell, and they are burning out over here. So the people that's getting service, like, I can't check on you and service you, and at some point I'm going to need help. And the only way to be able to see that is if you have clear, concise milestones written out, like, once I do this, then I do that. Once I do this, then I do that. And if this happens, it triggers this to happen. Like really having a system in place, a machine that you can just replicate what you're doing.
Well, and you mentioned something that I think we need to drill into a little bit more. When you talk about having the mindset of an employee, I actually see two separate issues with that. The first of all, you've got somebody who always worked for somebody else. Now they start a business. You've got to actually learn how to have the conditioning of a business owner. You've got to learn how to do all kinds of things you didn't really have to deal with when you were somebody else's employee. But I think I also see the issue that when they get to that 3 to 5 year mark, like some people manage to muddle their way through and kind of reactively figure out how to think like a business owner to some degree, just because necessity forces them to. Right. And they just kind of, in a sloppy and rocky way, manage to navigate their way through it enough to survive and stay afloat. Right. But the second issue comes into play where I see they hire an employee and that employee doesn't know how to navigate it like they do. And they have no incentive to really figure it out that much because they're getting paid as an employee. They're not getting paid as a business owner. So they don't really care that much, and they don't have the skill set. So what happens is there's this expectation that forms that, of course, my employees will make the same transition that I just did. And of course they don't, and they're never going to, but and so I see that being a particular issue in that 3rd to 5th year. The ones who are fortunate enough to make it that far, the survivors of that first 30% that are already gone by that point, I see it as, they are able to get there if they do it all themselves, but they just don't know how to translate that to hiring staff. What's your take on that?
I think that it also speaks to what they understand to trust their staff to do. So, there's different leadership styles, there's different business acumen that people can acquire over their period of work history or career. And when you start moving into that business owner mindset, you have to have an ability to see things before you burn out your staff. Like if they're not performing well, it's not, I always believe it starts at the head. So if there's something going on, you can't always blame them. Sometimes you have to look at, well, what tools and resources that I provide to that person, especially if they're an employee. I often find that people start off with contractors, and one day, that's a whole nother topic for another day. They don't get their contracts done correctly, and they, borderline really have employees because they don't know the difference between the two. But a lot of people are bringing folks on as contractors and giving them piecemealed pieces of their business, and it affects the flow and the effectiveness of the actual product or service. Because if I can't govern how you're doing what you're doing because you're coming in as a contractor, it limits me from being able to ensure the same outcome with my customer each time. So I might be able to bring you in for one thing that I think I need, but because I can't afford to hire people, I'm misstepping here because I have all these contractors that really can't provide what I need. So I have a lot of turnover. I have a lot of people that's out there with my intellectual property that don't know what they're doing and probably using it to my disadvantage. And then I also have the issue of having to deal with the HR stuff. And I don't know HR. Like if I'm that person that I don't even know that I'm violating 5 laws right now. So
that's I think that's one of the issues I see with contract. They try to 1099 everybody, but you have ones that really should be employees, but they're thinking, well, I'm avoiding payroll taxes, so
exactly.
or any of that other the legal implications of hiring employees, but then you potentially end up in hot water because they're saying, well, now we're going to retroactively reclassify these as W-2s, and now you owe back taxes and you owe penalties and all this kind of stuff. And yeah.
And then that's when they get fried and they might jump out the boat at that time in that 3 to 5 years because they finally stood up and said they wanted to be an employer and took the steps, but didn't have the proper understanding of all the things that they should do.
And I think in some cases, the liability can still attach to you personally, even if you shut the business down. So you can't necessarily just walk away by declaring bankruptcy or closing the business. So yeah, I think but one of the things that kind of going back to the mindset issue that came up for me was that I'm just realizing is you have a business owner might say, well, I need to hire somebody to come in and do coaching for my staff because they have the wrong mindset, not realizing that the owner is actually the one with the mindset issue.
Right.
That's
exactly.
And it's like, well, we got to deal with problem number 1 before we can even have a conversation about problem number 2. So, I mean, do you see that a lot?
Absolutely. I can't stress enough how many times I tell people, it's really from the head. If you don't get it, then your staff is probably going to be struggling with it. Unless you've mastered it and you just don't want to be the person in front of the room, I would still participate, and that builds team, but it's also to see what they're being taught. You get to get the information as well as be participatory in your team to do group activities or whatever that will build upon what your foundation is. We pass off our business to coaches and consultants to talk to our team so much that they don't remember that we're the ones in charge. So when things start to go wrong, they yield to what that person may have told them was best practice, which you may not even know nothing about, or they may have told them something to improve the business that you're not even bought into. And now your team has gotten all these hours of training to improve the business that you don't believe in, and that becomes the barrier for your staff. So it's really interesting when I see people not really want to be involved in that process because it is a team effort when it comes to things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think this gets to the heart of what our discussion is here. When we talk about trauma, I know you've mentioned this is an area that you see with business owners. And I think it can be an uncomfortable subject a lot for somebody to even admit is trauma playing a role in the mindset that you've currently got that's essentially the limiting factor on the growth of your business. Right. How do you engage with that? At what point do you start dealing with any kind of trauma as it relates to a business?
So it's at the point of entry, actually. I have specific questions I ask in my assessments that lets me know if there's something that they're believing that is blocking them from growing their business, sustaining their business, or trusting people to come in to support them. And it usually shows up in the way that they operate, hence the operating room behind me. A lot of the things that I do as a business therapist is to go in and see what they're doing. I become entrenched in their business in a way, strategically, in a way that allows me to see them and see how they're operating, because they may not even realize that that is what's coming up. Self-sabotage, yes. Imposter syndrome, yes. We know those terms sometimes in the business world, but there's other things that we're doing. We haven't properly grieved the loss. We don't know our story. We're afraid to be ourselves, the authenticity of who we really are. We play small. All these things are coming in based on something that might have happened in our past that taught us we can't do it. And then when you're on the cusp of doing something great, we had a great conversation, Dave, about that 3 to 5 years when the business feels real, right? And it's exciting and I want to do it. And it gets exciting, but those tapes come in right at that time to say, yeah, but you don't know how to do this. You don't know how to really grow a business. You don't know how to be a CEO. You don't know how to look at numbers. You have the faintest idea what a profit and loss statement is. Those are the times in which you need someone who understands and that's trauma informed, that can see when you're blocking your success. And you may not see it. It's kind of like that Johari window. You may not see it. So if I asked you straight out, what do you think is your biggest barrier? You wouldn't say me. You might say, oh, I don't have enough clients. I don't make enough money. But it could be you not wanting to make enough money because then you have to be seen, or you have to be responsible, or you have to be authentic. And those things scare you innately, right? It scares you and it causes you to kind of protect yourself, go back to what you know, go into those coping mechanisms that you created as a result of the traumatic experience you may have endured. And, it's not always what people would deem as, a rape victim or someone who had a very traumatic experience, like being abandoned in a place where they were hurt or kidnapped, because those are like what people think of when they say trauma. But trauma is also your parents weren't there for you. You felt abandoned at a young age because they worked all the time and you were bullied and you was hurt while you were at home, or you survived some kind of experience that in school, somebody was making fun of you, you were bullied. Like all these things are tapes that we keep in our minds, that when we're trying to do something we're called to do, or when we're really good at something, we question ourselves. So to take a step forward is like a major fear factor for those that have gone through that, because it means being hurt again. It means being vulnerable again. It means being put in a position where you can really, fall and fail. And that is the scariest place to be for folks that has experienced some level of trauma. So having that trauma-informed background for me to be able to be a trauma-informed entrepreneur and business therapist, that's what I call it, allows you to see those things, so that when we're building out your business and we're doing a strategic plan for 3 years, I can see when you're starting to get all like, I can't do it, without saying, come on, you can do it, get up and do it again. No, because that's not going to sustain me, because I can't respond to that all the time when you're not around. So the practices that we do that's infused into the programs that I have is around CEO wellness and identifying that for you, so you can, or with you, so that you can start to practice that while you're building your business.
I think the great thing about what you're doing here and the way you talk about it is, I think there's a lot of stigmas with mental health that have, I think in the workplace, a lot of the mentality is you just don't talk about that stuff at work. That's personal stuff that belongs at home. And I think for a CEO of a company, you obviously can't go sit in the boardroom. You can't be talking about mental health and trauma in a boardroom of a company. But it sounds like, and what I like about what you're doing here is you actually create an environment where somebody can actually discuss those in a business context, yes, in an environment where there's sufficient confidentiality that you can actually get to the root of dealing with things like that, but in a way that doesn't necessarily have to be visible for the entire staff of a company. Yeah. Because you kind of have to figure out, you have to deal with things in a way that's contextually appropriate. but I like the way that you're shifting the conversation of mental health into the business environment and finding a way to marry those two environments in a way that it works together. Because I think that seems to be a really missing resource. And that's partly why I wanted to have this conversation today.
Yeah.
But Latanya, why don't you just tell us a little bit about how can people find out more about what you're doing? How can people find out more about your company?
Well, definitely follow me on Facebook. I have both Eagle Eye Management LLC on Facebook as well as Latanya Dubois. You can also look at my website. I have a couple of things on there to tell you about what I do at www.eagleeyemanagementllc.com. Those are the strongest places to catch me. I also have a Calendly link that I will be giving to Dave that you can click on to schedule some time to spend with me, and we can talk about what your personal needs may be.
All right. Well, thank you, Latanya, for being with us today. I think you got a lot of really good stuff and a lot of really great expertise, and I think people are going to get a lot of value out of this. So, everyone, that's all for now. But look for more videos on the issues that our business owners are facing today, and there will be definitely more coming soon. So that's all for now. Until next time.
Thank you, Dave. Bye.